righty. Well, it's almost 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm awake here. It is, what is it? It's 5:53, Tuesday, December the 10th, in the year of our Lord, 2024. Anyway, um, there's Rocky. Rocky never has trouble sleeping. I wish I could sleep the way he sleeps. He's a really good sleeper. Anyway, there he is. Yeah. I'm going to tell you a story now because I'm awake and I was thinking of this. It's funny the things that pop into your head when you can't sleep, some of the stuff you remember. But this story is a story about a man that I met in 1983, 84 in there. It's really the story of a miracle. At least I believe it's a miracle. You may have your own spin on it or your own take on it, but I'll tell you the story and you decide what you make of it. No problems there at all. This is just what I was told and what I saw. And I think it's a miracle. You may think it's something else. But when I first left home, when I was 15 years old, I stayed at a school teacher's place. And I stayed with that school teacher and his family for a couple of years. And the school teacher, he had a relation, but we used to call him Uncle Ross. Don't remember the man's last name, but he was just Ross, and everybody called him Uncle Ross. And who this Ross, looking back on it now, just to paint a mental picture for you, if you remember the TV show from the 1990s, Seinfeld, there was a character on there by the name of George Costanza. Well, the man who played George Costanza's father on that show, if you can picture Mr. Costanza, George's father on Seinfeld, Uncle Ross was just like him. Looked identical to him. Talked the same way, the way he'd emphasize his words and stuff. Same mannerism, same way of speaking, everything. That was Uncle Ross anyway, just to give you an idea of what Uncle Ross was like. And Uncle Ross was one of those old school type guys where if he said he knew it, and if he said that this is what it is, then that's what it is. And no matter how much evidence you put in front of him to the contrary, he knows better than you do. He was like that anyway. A lot of older people were like that, hey? But when I knew this man, he'd have been about the age I am now. He'd have been in his late 50s, probably in mid to late 50s. But the story I'm going to relay to you occurred in 1947 when Uncle Ross was a young man. And he had proof. And I'll tell you about the proof in a minute, as I did see the proof. He showed it to me. But basically, when Uncle Ross was a young man in 1947, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The doctor told him, this was in the spring of 1947, the doctor told him, he said, go home and get your affairs in order because you have terminal cancer. There's nothing we can do for you. Your body is just riddled with it. You're going to die. This is a death sentence, basically. You're not going to live. You're going to die. Don't expect to see 1948. Get your affairs in order and do it soon. Well, Uncle Ross, what did he do? He got on a steamship and he traveled to France. Now, he was quite sick. He's full of cancer. He went to the doctor because he was sick, That's how he found out he was full of cancer. He goes over to France on a steamship. He was just a man in his early 20s back then. And he visited a place called Lourdes. You've probably heard of it. It's a big Catholic shrine. And he said he went over there, and there was a building, He said there was a building there that was just full of, canes and crutches and wheelchairs and different things that were left behind by people who no longer needed them. There was a bunch of seeing eye dogs in there that hadn't been fed in years. They were not looking well at all. But I'm just kidding about the seeing eye dogs. They didn't leave their seeing eye dogs behind. But gotta put a little levity into the story, I guess. But the thing about the crutches and the wheelchairs and all that stuff, that is true. Apparently, when he told me, there was a building there full of this stuff that had been left behind by people who no longer needed it. He said there was also a chapel there, and up in the rafters of the chapel, there was canes and different things, leg braces and different things like that, all hanging from the rafters and stored up in the rafters and stuff. All stuff that was left behind by the people who no longer needed it when they left there. He said there was 2 separate buildings for changing. And you go in the building there was a building for men and there was a building for ladies. When what you did in there is you took your street clothes off and you put on, you stripped down right naked, took all your street clothes off, stripped down naked, and then you put on a white gown. And it was the same gown for the ladies and for the men, just a long white gown that covered your body. And when you came out of there, they had people there that would talk to you, find out what your issue was and so on. They'd pray over you, and then they'd lead you down to the waters. And apparently these waters at Lourdes, the story goes that they were blessed by the Virgin Mary, by the Mother of God, the Mother of Jesus. That's the story anyway, that they were blessed by her. And that they had these remarkable healing properties, healing powers. Well, they put you in the water, and we come up out of the water or whatever, take you back up, basically towel you off, put your street clothes back on, and go home, was the idea. Anyway, he said he was quite sick when he got there. The trip over there had taken a lot out of him because he was an ill man. He was dying, and he went over there on a steamship. That's how people traveled to go to Europe. You didn't get a lot of people flying on airplanes in those days. It was mostly steamship travel, still in the late 1940s. He went over to France on a steamship. The trip over there took a lot out of him. The trip over there nearly killed him. By the time he actually got to Lourdes, he was in bad shape, And he said he come up out of those waters and he felt just completely cured. He was just like a new man. He was full of strength and vigor and energy. Felt like he could run a marathon and build a house, basically, all in one day. He felt so good. Anyway, he come back over here. He goes back to his doctor. He's feeling great, Certainly doesn't feel like he's dying. Goes to see the doctor. He told the doctor the story. The doctor basically said, you're full of crap. You're dying. Go home. Get your affairs in order like I told you to. You're full of cancer. Like, this is a stupid conversation to be having. Just do what I told you to do. Because, you're dying. Like, smarten up. Get your affairs in order. Stop all this crap. All this false hope and stuff. You're dying. You're full of cancer. I showed you the x-rays. You're full of cancer. Body's riddled with masses. He kept insisting, nope, you're wrong, Doc, you're wrong. I'm cured. Finally, the doctor says, you know what? I'm going to prove to you how silly you're being. I'm going to humor your little fantasy that you're cured. And he said, I'm going to x-ray you. And I'll prove to you that this is all stupidity. And, it's going to be a rude awakening, but it's something you need. So I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to prove to you that you are, in fact, a dying man and that you need to do as I told you and to get your affairs in order, get your house in order, get right with God, and so on, because you're dying. Well, he took the x-rays, and when the doctor saw the x-rays, his jaw damn near hit the floor. No sign of cancer. Totally clean. No masses anywhere to be found. Cured. Cured of a cancer that was ravaging him, that was literally just taking him out, eating him alive. Cured. Completely cured. And anyway, Uncle Ross had the x-rays. He had the before x-rays and the after x-rays, both of which were taken in 1947. I saw them. And you could clearly see the big white masses all through his body on the before x-rays. The after x-rays, it was perfectly clean, clear, no problems. Just nothing unusual, nothing that you wouldn't expect to see, in an x-ray of a person's body. Anyway, that's the story. Uncle Ross, who was supposed to die in 1947, he was still alive as late as 1985. Now, I don't know. I'd imagine he'd be dead now because he'd be over 100 if he isn't. But, anyway, he was still alive. Like I say, he would have been a man in the mid-80s, about the age I am now, about in his mid to late 50s. And so, what more proof do you need? Really, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's a miracle. You guys say you may have a different take on it, but all I can tell you is I sat across a picnic table from that man in the 1980s, in the mid-80s, and he told me his story. Sat across a picnic table at a cottage on a lake called the Big Rideau Lake. And I sat across from that man, and he took it. He had the envelope with the x-rays and everything. He took it all out. He showed it to me. And the before and the after. Told me his story. And this was a man I should never have met. He should have died 20 years before I was born. And yet I sat there and I had that conversation with that man, and I heard his story, and he showed me his proof, So there you go. Yeah. He visited Lourdes, and he come home, and he lived at least another 35 years anyway, that I know of. I don't know when he died. I'm sure he'd be gone. Like I say, I'm sure he's gone by now, because he'd be over 100 if he isn't. But still, he had a lot longer run at that point even than he was told he was going to have. And like I say, I don't know how many years he lived after that. Our last time I saw him would have been around 1985, I guess. And so I don't know. Like I say, I'd have been about 17 the last time I saw him. And I'm 56 now, to give you an idea. But he was about in his mid to late 50s when I knew him and when he told me his story. So there you go. Yeah, just a kind of a neat story anyway. Over the years you meet different people and you hear their stories, and it's interesting. It's very interesting just to talk to people and to hear these things, And he had the proof. He had the x-rays from his doctor. And the doctor himself was not a believer. The doctor himself was like, stop the foolishness. You're full of cancer. Go home, get your affairs in order, like I told you to. Didn't believe a word of it. But when he saw the x-rays, he was dumbstruck. He didn't know what to say. Anyway, that's it. We'll see you later.